Hey, partners of commercial fishermen, welcome back to another episode of our amazing podcast where we get to hang out each week. And it really, truly means so much that you tune in and you take time to listen to us, whether you are driving in the car, doing errands, doing chores in the house, whatever it may be. Thank you for choosing to click on us because we get to bond over this incredibly unique lifestyle that has subtle, but also pretty big differences from that of I don't want to say normal, but a typical job or lifestyle. Commercial fishing. It is the biggest yoga practice of all time. It is the biggest practice of learning to be adaptable, to change, and to go with the flow, and also to keep coming back to ourselves so we're not constantly stressing the F out. I know you hear me. And part of that stress in our community is not only safety, which is always our number one concern. We want our fishermen to fish safely. We want them to come home. Number two, the biggest stress is, drum roll, finances. I'm sure that you've been there, done that. I know I have. And we continue to tweak and create our financial plans to make sure that we have a happy and healthy household and partnership, because finances can definitely get in the middle of a lovely time with your partner. I mean, how many times have you gotten stressed out about money before? You're not alone. So this is why I love this episode with Chris Capone. We had Chris on before in the spring, and he talked about finances and how to get your taxes prepared and ready and everything. And we got all organized. And then he mentioned at the end of the episode, also September is a great time to reach out to your accountant. And I'd love to come back and share more with your community. And I'm like, heck yeah. So thankfully it was amazing. Chris came on and we talked all about what it's like to prepare for next year in September, why September is such a big deal. And also the questions that you can ask your accountant to ensure that you can reduce your taxes. He mentioned how September is an ideal month because when it's September, it's the 9th month of the year. We have 12 months in the entire year. And so this gives us time to figure out what we need to adjust, maybe purchase or make repairs to or rebuild in our business, our fishing businesses, in order to help reduce those taxes. Because by the time the new year comes around, it's already too late. I mean, you can't really have any deductions for 2025 if you're talking to your accountant in 2026. So this is a great episode. I hope this brings peace and eases stress, because I know it did for me, because I'm definitely emailing my accountant right after I get off the mic with you guys. And just to touch base, say, hey, this is what we are projecting to make this year. What can we do to reduce our tax liability? And, it's one of these conversations that can feel very scary. It can feel super boring, and it can feel very adult. I'm 43. I still don't understand what it means to be an adult. I know I'm not alone here. What does that even mean? We can vote. We can purchase alcohol and lottery tickets and things like that. But adulting, how to continue to have our lives just kind of on cruise control, and also not feel so stressed at the end of the year that we end up overpaying in taxes, which I know we've definitely done before. So I hope that this episode is helpful. If it is, I'd love for you to email me support@POCFpride.com if you like this episode, or if you didn't, or if there's something else that you want to hear more of, let me know, because that's why we're here. If you want to connect further with me and other POCFs in our community, I have to remind you about our private group chat. It's such a special place to just talk to people who get it. I mean, people can hop on there and say, you know what, I'm not feeling that great. Has anybody gone through times where they just feel challenged? And what did you do? That is a conversation that we've had recently. And it's so nice to see the support from women from all over the world that come together and say, girl, I've been there. Here's what helped me. Or celebrate the wins. Someone just had a baby. How do we deal with selling fish at the fish market? Are there any kind of social media marketing campaigns that have been helpful for you when you're selling your fish, to when your partner's gone? This is your first season without them, or this is your 40th season with them. It doesn't matter. We have all kinds of experiences across the board, and it's really beautiful. So check that out at POCFpride.com. And without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode with Chris Capone. I'm Megan Waldrop, host of the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast, an extension of an online community for partners to connect and feel less alone. Our podcast invites fishermen, family, friends, and supporters of the industry to learn, laugh, vent, and hear stories about this incredibly unique way of life. What do you say? Let's dive in.
Hey partners. As you know, one of my greatest joys is recognizing how important you are to the commercial fishing industry. But did you know that POCFs are also the biggest influencers when it comes to safety? In fact, the number one reason that fishermen say they wear safety gear is, quote, because my partner tells me to. That's the power of love, and it plays a vital role in keeping our fishermen safe. Talking to your fishermen about safety can reduce the current reality that 80% of fishermen who are lost at sea weren't wearing a PFD. We can change that. That's why I'm proud to partner with Kent Safety Products. They make Coast Guard approved PFDs and innovative flotation gear designed specifically for commercial fishermen. Their gear is comfortable, durable, and made to move with fishermen no matter the fishery, because the best safety gear is the kind they'll actually wear. And just so you know, we only partner with companies that genuinely care and produce high-quality products for the well-being of our fishing communities. Kent Safety Products is definitely one of them. Visit KentSafetyProducts.com to find the right gear for you, your fishermen, and your kiddos too. That's KentSafetyProducts.com.
Chris Capone, one of our financial gurus, is back. I'm so happy to have you on. We had you on in the spring, and you mentioned about September being a premium, great time to connect with your accountant or CPA. And so thank you for being with us in September so we can figure out what the heck we need to do with that information. Why September, and choosing the right CPA, because it can be so challenging to find someone who understands the commercial fishing lifestyle, maritime lifestyle, any kind of money that has to deal with being a small business owner and just working with the ebbs and flows of those finances that go with it. So thank you so much for your time and for being on the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
Yay. I love it. And I love having you on because you're such a great guest, but also we just get into it. Last time I think we got into it and I forgot to introduce how amazing you were. So I ended up doing that on the intro.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, if you could introduce people to tell them what you do specifically and why we should listen to you.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I started a bookkeeping and fractional CFO business about 3 years ago, and we focus on working with small businesses to help them see their finances clearly and understand the impacts of different decisions that they might make and on their business. And the reason that we started this business, the opportunity was really transitioning from my career in the corporate world, but I started talking to lots of small business owners, and they kept saying, "Hey, my tax CPA only talks to me once a year, and it's typically around tax time, and it's always a surprise about how much money I'm going to owe." And that's a generality, but it is a generality that's true. And the reason is that tax CPAs aren't set up to provide the ongoing consistent support and guidance to small businesses throughout the year, because that's just their business model. It's not that they're it's nothing against them as people or professionals at all. I mean, that's just, more or less the business model. And when I was meeting with small business owners, I kept hearing the, very similar issues in that, my financials don't make sense. I don't get them on time. I don't get any financials. And I was like, wow, okay, well, it's hard to make good business decisions if you don't have a good understanding of where you currently are with your finances. And so just kind of started the business very organically by myself, and got a couple clients, and then hired a couple contractors, and then got some more clients, and then hired employees. And now I think we're working with like 90 to 100 different businesses. We've got a team of 20 professionals, and we just, like I said, help business owners see their finances clearly and navigate, that entrepreneurial journey and the unknown and all that good stuff. So.
Wow. Congratulations. What an amazing story within 3 years. That is a very short time to have such a big impact. And we appreciate that. And also, you are in Wilmington, North Carolina. You are, I think, 14 blocks away from where I am right now. Which is
it's pretty funny that we're doing
in your new office,
yeah,
which is great.
Yeah.
And also want to note that Chris can take on clients from any state. You don't have to be from North Carolina. And also to clarify too, fractional CFO because
Yep.
I had to look that up. A fractional CFO, tell me if I have this correctly, is someone who you can step in from a fraction of a time. That's where I got the fractional from, to help
Yep.
businesses get their finances in order. So instead of hiring a full-time a chief financial officer, you can hire a fractional CFO like Capone and Associates to help clean out all the cobwebs and to make things really tight and to really ease stress, because that's what it comes down to when it comes to money and to getting your taxes in order. Because as we know, it can feel like such a scramble any time of the year. And especially because Chris and I have famously done our taxes once a year, even though I know it is definitely recommended to do it quarterly. And there's lots of small businesses that do it quarterly. So it is nice to have some kind of guidance on how to freaking do that correctly, especially because partners of commercial fishermen are usually the ones taking care of all the bookkeeping. And to even know that we could call upon someone like Capone and Associates or another business to help us with bookkeeping is kind of like having your own team to back you up, just to make sure that you're doing things correctly. And yeah, you don't have to have that stress of thinking like you're going to totally sink your household income because you didn't put the decimal in the right place. So let's dive in. Okay, let's go back to basics. What's the difference between an accountant and a CPA?
Yeah, so a CPA is a certified public accountant, and generally most tax accountants are CPAs. Now, you don't have to be a CPA to file somebody's taxes. So the CPA is like the highest level designation that you could get in that is, you know, um, publicly, the public designation, and each state has their own board that oversees and licenses the CPA. So somewhat similar to like the bar for lawyers, right? So it's kind of like that designation. An accountant, I mean, that it can be is a general term, but generally the accountant is someone that's making sure that all of the financial transactions in a business or a household or organization are getting accounted for properly in creating financial statements. Uh,
Okay.
a lot of people will use CPA and accountant interchangeably. And that's just because, if I was talking about, some specifics in the fishing world, I'd probably use some generic terms as well, just because I don't know like
Right.
very detailed differences. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. I love going back to the root word is accountant, who accounts to make sure things
yeah,
are
I know.
accounted for. That's great. Fractional, the fraction of time. Yes, this is very
Yeah.
helpful to break it down.
Yeah.
So so it's interchangeable, but is there, since we're in fishing and it's small business and it can be lots of money and lots of write-offs, is one
Yep.
better than the other for a fishing family?
Yeah. I mean, it at the end of the day, having a good accountant or a good CPA can really save you money. And I've seen situations where um where people didn't have the right person, and it really cost them a lot of money. But again, you could have a really good CPA that has a practice that's totally full, and he or she doesn't have the time of day, so you're just a number, and that could be bad as well. What it comes down to is you need to find somebody that you trust, someone that's going to communicate with you, and someone that's obviously qualified to be able to do that work as well. So,
Absolutely. Awesome. And we're going to get into some of those questions and points later too. But I'd love to know, why September? You kind of mentioned before about how people say that the accountant attempts to contact you in the beginning of the year around tax time, and then you're caught off guard, like how much money you may owe. So why is September an ideal time? And are the questions that we ask in September different from the questions that we would ask in the new year or spring?
yeah. So the reason, and call it, September, October, like this time of the year is a great time to get with, is to kind of finalize your plan for the rest of the year. Because in September, October, you've got 9, 10 months under your belt, and you can see, hey, we've made X amount of dollars. We've lost X amount of dollars. What is our plan to be able to reduce that tax liability and like you can't wait until the last week of December because
Right.
you're constrained by time, right? And especially this year, there's been a lot of changes in legislation with the one big beautiful bill act and all that type of stuff. So now's a good time to touch base with your accountants and have, financials, that you could talk about. Hey, here's where we are, this is what we expect to make over the next 3 months. Here's how much money we're going to make. Like, what's our tax liability look like? What should we start to plan for? And also, what are some things that we could do to reduce that tax liability? For example, I need to, need to do some, improvements or repairs, or I need to invest in some equipment. Let's do that before the end of the year so that you can write that off as a tax expense. Or it could be, hey, you should max out your, retirement account, your IRA, because that money is, that's a direct tax write-off. There's so many different variables. And that's why the sooner that you can talk to your tax professional about it, the more time you have to plan and think about the best next steps.
Amazing. I'm writing this down because we're going to email our accountant later today after we get off the phone because of this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to dive a little deeper than what we were talking about before, because I also want to note that Capone Associates, Chris, also manages boat dealerships. So that's a part of your business. And so Chris actually does understand the verbiage and boats in ways that maybe other CPAs and accountants do not. But if a fisherman or a fishing family or POCF is wanting to find someone local that they can talk to,
Yep.
is there a certain question that we can ask besides the trust, of course, the communication, which is super important? But is there a certain question that we can ask to make sure someone gets it, that we are dealing with maritime life?
Yeah. I would ask, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think that if it were me, I would ask here's what we do. What other businesses or what other industries do you work with that are similar to this? And what are some of the nuances that we should be aware of? And, I think that will be a good first question to get them talking. And then from there, you could kind of dig in a little bit further.
That's great. Yeah, I've heard people talk about talking to accountants who deal with farmers is another very helpful thing because they deal with perishable goods and fluctuating
Exactly.
seasons and everything like that.
Yep.
So, as I mentioned, you worked with the boat dealers, and you work with people out of state, which is amazing. So, you mentioned talking to an accountant, like what is their communication style? And so I'm going to ask you questions that I would try to vet someone else
Cool.
and kind of set you up as the gold standard of what would be nice to expect from another person if they choose to go, whoever they choose to go with. But
Yep.
kind of what is like a high value investment with someone who's going to deal with your finances. So I'm going to ask you the questions to see what
Okay.
you do, and we'll go from there. So
Yep.
how quickly do you respond during tax season, or it may be in September, any of these seasons?
Yeah. I mean, our goal internally is that we try to respond to everybody within 24 hours. And it might be, and that response might be, hey, I received your note and I'm looking into this. I need some time, but at least just getting a response, because there's nothing worse than silence, right? So
Absolutely.
our goal is within 24 hours that we respond to our clients.
Got it. And do you have a flat rate scope? And what would fall outside of that? Falls outside of your basic financial existence, if
Yeah.
that's the way to put it?
Well, the way that we generally work is on a fixed monthly fee. And the
Okay.
way that we determine that fee is based on the scope of the engagement. If it's only bookkeeping, it'll be a little bit less, but if it's bookkeeping, it's financial reporting, and it's like cash flow forecasting, that's going to expand the scope. And then it's the quantity, the complexity of the business. And then also at the end of the day, it's like, the value that we're able to add, because if we've got years and years of experience where we've solved problems that help people save tons of money, like I'm not going to charge you 1 hour, to solve a problem that saves you like an incredible amount of money. But but that's more so the reason that we do the fixed fee is because it's transparent, it's easy to plan for, and we set the expectations, and there's no surprise invoices, and like there's, we do a good job of scoping that. Throughout the journey, there's always stuff that comes up and that might be considered out of scope. And the way that we tell our clients is like, hey, we're always happy to hop on a phone call and like talk about an issue that you're experiencing in your business, because we want you to feel that you can come to us. If there's like a big project or initiative that comes out of that call, then we can talk about that separately if we need to bill. But we like to set ourselves up where we want our clients to contact us because it helps us be better partners. And if they're worried about us charging them for every 6 minutes we're on the phone with them, that deters people from reaching out, and then could, and that's just the way that our model is. So
That makes sense. Is there anything that you do not deal with financially?
I mean, we don't do like personal financial planning and like investments and like investment strategy. We really, really focus on small businesses, zero to, and it's crazy. A small business is technically defined as like under 500 employees. And like, so like, a small business could have a couple 100 million in revenue, but it's still called a small business technically. But we really just focus on small businesses, and we actually do not do taxes internally because our scope is we do bookkeeping and fractional CFO services. That's our core competency. It's different than what a tax CPA does. And then we work with a bunch of different tax CPAs and kind of manage that, relationship for the client. Also, what that does is it creates another layer of review. So we're doing the books, we're doing the financials, we send it over to the tax CPA, they kind of do their review as well. So it's another level of quality control.
Got it. And so for you, for example, if we worked with you and your services, you have this pretty packaged, it's dusted off and cleared up, and we could hand that over to a CPA and they would be able to just get after it. So
Yep.
could you also work with somebody like H&R Block, like get the information that you have and just hand it over to more of a,
Absolutely.
okay,
Yep.
awesome. That's good to know.
Absolutely. Yep.
About your flat rate scope, you said you charge a monthly fee because
Yep.
fishing families operate seasonally, and
Yeah.
cash can come in and it can go out in waves. Not to use all the maritime puns, but I can't help it. Can people pay you 6 months in advance, a year in advance, or do you prefer the monthly payments?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to pay in advance, would never say no to that, right? But no,
Awesome.
that's a fair point. I mean, we our whole goal is to support our clients and businesses. And, if we're going to do something that puts a constraint on their business or cash flow, like, we're not accomplishing what our overall goal is.
Right.
And so we would probably figure out a way that works, best for that individual. But at the same time, we might say, hey, this is part of what we're doing for you guys is helping you plan and budget, for months. So, what is what are your expenses over the next 6 months? Like maybe we should, so that would be a discussion.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
generally we're here to support the business, not make it harder for them. So
That's awesome. I'm surprised by how many people won't allow for upfront payments. For example, mortgage. We're like, can we just pay it one chunk? They're like, no, it has to be every month. We're like, okay, God, all right,
that's
fine.
crazy.
But it would be
Yeah.
it would be nice if you had that option to say, I'm going to pay the mortgage for 6 months and I don't have to think about it. Instead,
Yeah.
then we figure out our own way to bookkeep and keep track of all that. But that's okay, great. So flexibility, amazing. How do
Yep.
you handle multi-state filings? Because lots of
Yep.
fishermen fish out of state from where they actually live. I mean, Chris was fishing in California. We had a home in North Carolina. People
Yep.
are fishing in Alaska. They live somewhere else. So how do y'all handle that?
Yeah, that's a technical, that's a pretty technical thing where it gets into, generally you need to file a tax return in the state in which you're generating revenue, right? So, if you live in North Carolina, but you're working on a boat in Alaska, and that, let's just say that you own that vessel and it's registered in Alaska, like, you're definitely going to be filing tax returns there. I would imagine that, or most folks, let's say that, most folks that are fishing, I mean, are they getting W-2s, or are most folks working as independent contractors, kind of just,
Yeah.
just cash basis type stuff?
Yeah, mainly is you're a sole proprietor LLC
Yep.
within your boat, and then you have deckhands who are contractors. That's how
Right.
that works. Now, if you own a fleet of ships, I'm not sure how that works. I know people who do work for, people who own several ships, and they might operate differently. But generally
Yep.
speaking, our community are small business owners and then contract workers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, generally you're going to be filing, where you've earned the revenue. Now, let's say that, you're not going to double pay taxes. Like, you don't need to pay North Carolina and Alaska. You say, hey, here's the revenue I generated in Alaska. Here's the expenses. Here's my income from working in Alaska. I pay tax to Alaska based on that. And here's any revenue I've generated working in North Carolina. And that would, that's probably, that's probably how that would work out. I mean, but if you're traveling all over the place, you don't need to file 30 tax returns,
Yeah.
be reasonable about it. And
Yeah.
that's something that a tax professional can help you figure
Okay.
out. And,
Awesome.
and no matter where you are, you still got to unfortunately pay Uncle Sam, the federal government,
Right.
regardless. But
Yes. And
yeah,
you know what? That's why we have beautiful sidewalks and streets, paved roads, and things like
yeah,
that. So,
exactly.
um, okay. Can you walk me through a previous similar client's process? Have you worked with anybody? Well, I know you worked with boats. So can you talk about a similar client that you've worked with and what that
And
process was
so,
like?
again, like, boat dealerships, are very seasonal. And, I've worked with several that are multi-locational. So they've got, a Florida, they've got a New York, they've got a North Carolina. And so those businesses being seasonal is, very, very similar in that, during the springtime and the fall time, those are usually the peak time. So it's like, all right, we're generating most of we're going to generate 80% of our revenue in cash, like over a 5-month period, right? So we need to be smart about that cash, just because we've got a couple hundred, or whatever it is in the bank account. Like, we don't need to go crazy. It's all right, we've got to pay rent, we've got all these expenses. And so, and at that level, we're getting into like a little bit more higher level and sophistication of business, where, we're putting together, forecasts and budgets and plans that says, hey, here's what our burn's going to be over the next months. And I think that probably could be aligns a lot with commercial fishermen, in that, you've only got certain seasons throughout the year where you're generating the majority of your revenue and your profit. And then in the off season, you still have expenses. Those expenses don't go away. So it's just coming up with an idea and an understanding of, you know, what we need to do to be able to get through those off seasons.
Got it.
And then from like the different states perspective, basically what we do is we say, okay, in Florida, we generated this much revenue. This was our net income in Florida. This was our net income in North Carolina. This was our net income in New York. And then you pay state taxes based on that, based on those domiciles.
Yeah. Okay. And so you mentioned your communication style. You try to get back to people within 24 hours, even if it's just an update. Do you
Yeah.
proactively reach out to your clients in September? Or are there certain times of year that you proactively reach out to them?
Yeah. So, and again, generally what we do is we meet with our clients once a month. Like, that's part of pretty much every engagement that we do. So I would call that, that's part of the proactive approach is, we're meeting every month. We're talking about things that we see, any issues we've identified, opportunities, and then it's just like this continuous cycle of planning, right? It's like, just, okay, here's what's happening. What should we do based on this? And it's just that recurring, kind of cycle. So,
Yeah, which is healthy. I've realized as someone who's avoided dealing with finances for until I got really stressed out, and to actually be able to face your money, the numbers that are just numbers,
Yeah.
uh, it does bring peace, even though it can feel like it could be extremely stressful. Like our last conversation is talking about, lighting a candle, making a nice drink, like whatever it is, create a date for you and your finances to really get down there because you're going to be okay. It's just that it can feel so stressful sometimes for some people. And then when you get after it, you're like, oh, wait, I actually have more control than I thought I did. This feels good. Now I have an actual plan going forward instead of going, I think I got this. I think we can do this. It's like, no, we got this. We can do this. And let's move forward. So,
I remember you bringing that up
yeah,
on our last conversation. I thought that was the coolest idea, like having
love
a
it.
date with your finances.
Heck yeah.
And also to that, I mean, at least for me, is that most of my stress comes from the unknown, right?
Right.
Like if I don't like if there's ambiguity and I don't really know what the situation is, that's when I get the most stressed. But if it's a shitty situation and I know about it, like at least it's like, okay, like here it is, and like now we can like start to work like
Right.
to figure that out as opposed to just bury my head in the sand, which I am very, very guilty of doing that in certain aspects of
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
so and there's another thing called the professional's curse, where it's like, for example, like an accountant, I spend all day helping other people and other businesses keep their finances clean and
Mhm.
accurate, that I always deprioritize my own because I'm
Right.
like focused on helping other people. And so I mean, even for me, I mean, there's times where I'm just like, damn, like I haven't even paid attention to my stuff, in
Mm.
a couple of months. Like I need to, and then I know what it's like to be like, yeah, I don't want to
Yeah.
do it, I'll just kick the can down the road. And then I finally do it. I'm like, all right, this is good. We're back on track.
Yeah.
So
Totally. What is that saying? That is it the cobbler's son has no shoes? Is that it?
yes, yes,
Yes.
exactly. Exactly.
Totally. And let me tell you, POCFs know about ambiguity and unknown. That's for freaking sure.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
if there's
Yeah.
any way that we can have some known, to have some
Yep.
of that ease of stress and anxiety, this is the way to do it. And yes, and I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that you also have times that you feel like that in your own life, because that's so human and relatable. And that's awesome. And I totally get that, prioritizing others, because it's more fun that way. You're like, ooh, that's interesting. What are they getting into? Okay, let me figure this out. And then you get into your own, you're like, oh God. All right. It becomes
Yeah,
more of an
exactly.
emotional response than if it's with somebody else. But that's great. Okay. And you may have answered this before, but I just want to wrap it up with this too, what's the best way to prepare for your taxes if you're filing quarterly or yearly? Like the difference, if you're either a quarter filer or a yearly filer, are there
Yep.
similarities? Are there differences?
So I'll kind of everybody files an annual tax return, but the quarterly that you're talking about is that you can make quarterly estimated payments
Thank you.
against what the tax liability is going to be. And generally speaking, all, everybody needs to make at least quarterly, like needs to make at least quarterly payments. Like if you're an employee of a company, you're making quarterly payments as part of like the withholdings in your paycheck every
Oh,
week, right? So
got
that's
it.
why, the employee of a corporation down the street isn't talking about quarterly tax payments, because the
Right.
company's withholding those taxes and remitting them for you on a weekly or biweekly basis. But as a small business owner or an independent contractor or a sole proprietor, the government, the federal government says that you need to pay, quarterly estimated taxes. And if you don't do it, it's not the end of the world. Like there's some small penalties and some small fees. And like, I know lots and lots of people that don't do it. And they're just like, I'd rather keep the money in my bank, I'd rather keep the money with me than with than with the government. It's
Yeah.
so, in the way that you figure out what your quarterly payments are going to be, it's based on what you expect your income is going to be for the year, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people will just use historic information. Hey, the last 5 years I've made, $20,000, So I'm gonna, I need to pay estimated tax payments based on that or whatever it is.
Got it. Yeah, it's good to know that there's other people striking those big old checks, not just us at the end
Oh
of the
yeah.
year. Holy moly. I was telling someone in my family about paying taxes, and her husband works for a corporation. And so it's like that, their
Yeah.
money's taken out, so they don't really think about it. They're like, yeah, we didn't get any money back this year. I was like, oh, we never get money back. I'm like, we're paying college tuition every spring and it's painful. That is what
Yeah.
our taxes are. So that's a really good point, is to the estimated quarter. And I guess for fishing families, you just base it on the year prior, because that's all you can really do, is kind of either the year prior or maybe years prior, have that
Yeah.
average and go from there, because you never know. And luckily, our Bristol Bay fishermen did great this summer. Last summer was not great. It was bring tears to your eyes how much they were getting paid. And this month they were making it rain. So I'm really stoked about that. But it's also, it's also a time to, you made it rain / we got to rein it in because we got to pay that money. So your taxes might be a little different than last year in the best way possible. But so last question, or second to last question, what do you hope is the biggest takeaway from our conversation today? Like, what do you hope that people take away from knowing more about the bookkeeping and getting their finances together in September to be prepared for 2026?
Yeah, I hope that the folks take away that, there's, if you don't, if you're not doing it, it's not the end of the world and you're gonna be fine. Like, but if you want to be a little bit more proactive, and if you want to, plan a little better, that at the end of the day, like, just having a good understanding of where you are with your financials is going to help you make better decisions, which can help save you money down the road. And, taxes are just one of those things that is just so scary to people because it's so complicated, and there's laws and, and if I don't do this, then what's going to happen? I mean, there's just so much, ambiguity and stress related around it, that I hope that everybody can at least find a coach or a tax CPA or somebody that can just help them, plan their finances and have a good understanding of where they are so that they don't get taken advantage of.
Oh, such a great note to end on. You totally get us to end it with, it's all good. But if you want some help, I mean, thank you for that. That's perfect. How can people contact you?
Chris at CaponeandAssociates.biz. We've got a website, CaponeandAssociates.biz. There's an intake form. My phone number is 910-415-7715. Call me, text me. Happy to talk. So
awesome. I appreciate the text availability, because that's usually the most convenient way for most people, especially in commercial fishing world. So thanks so much for your time, Chris Capone. We really, really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to email my accountant with Chris later today.
nice.
Thanks for that proactivity, and we'd love to have you back anytime. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. To support our community, I'd so appreciate it if you tap the subscribe button to this podcast or write a review. And if you're a POCF who wants to connect further, go to POCFpride.com for weekly vlogs and to learn about opportunities to join our private communities. We'd love to have you.